So, just think about this sentence for a second. Leave your land, your birthplace, your father's house, and go. No details, no map, just the voice. You have to think, what kind of person answers that call? And what kind of faith lets someone turn down wealth after winning a war? We might call that a lateral move, stepping sideways out of normal logic into a higher frame. But the Torah calls it lech lecha. Go to yourself. Faith begins where certainty ends. Stephen Hicks often says that philosophy defines how we see success. Modern culture tends to equate success with possession. The more you control, the freer you are. But this parsha, Lech Lecha, opens with a paradox. The one we know to be the father of faith becomes the father of nations, not by owning, but by releasing. Now the question is, can we build our lives not on what we hold, but on who holds us? And that question threads through Abraham's two great tests: the test of faith and the test of wealth. You might think that, what kind of test is wealth? Usually it's poverty that's a test. Since when is wealth a test? But the truth is that we know elsewhere in the Torah that it's very easy to slide into the idea of being self-made when you have wealth. Like, I did this. So that's also a test. It's also a test to see, do you remember who gave it to you? Okay, we find in Genesis chapter 15, verse 6, Ve'emin ba'Hashem v'yachshaveh Tzedaka. He, Avram, believed in the Lord, and he, the Lord, counted it to him for righteousness. The word that's used in the verse is Tzedaka, which can be translated loosely as righteousness or justice. Abraham's greatness was not intellect or conquest. It's not to say that he didn't have any of those two qualities, but his greatness was based on emunah, faith. Rabbi Nachman, in the Likutei Moharan, in the first section, in teaching 225, he teaches that faith has endless levels. It's not a binary. It's not like either you have it or you don't have it. Our faith in Hashem increases the more we understand that relationship. And there's always the possibility to deepen that faith. From the person who returns a lost wallet because it's right, to a nation that steps into the sea before it parts. You know, these are different magnitudes of faith. And we'll find in our own lives as well that we are given different types of tests which require different levels of faith. Like, okay, I understand that God can do miracles in this sort of mundane, sundry sort of situation. But what about this huge, big whopper of a test, of a difficult situation? The Chafetz Chaim notes that although Abraham recognized the owner of the palace, that's a quote from the Medrash, that's essentially Abraham looking at the world as if it is a mansion, and then realizing that there has to be an owner of that mansion. Right? His recognition of the one God. Although he was the one to accomplish this, he was living in a world of idolatry. So that should have been like the biggest item on his CV, on his resume. The fact that he recognized that there is only one God. Nevertheless, the Torah praises him for faith. Why is this? Because faith itself is the root of Tzedaka, is the root of righteousness. Faith is the courage to act when you don't know the outcome. Or it's a moral vision. It's a kind of trust that the universe is governed by goodness because the one who created it is infinitely good, and that we trust in this even when the evidence has not yet appeared. So that's the test of faith. Now the test of wealth as a spiritual trial. After defeating the 4 kings, we have a very serious war in this parsha. After defeating the 4 kings, Abraham is offered immense riches by the king of Sodom. But he replies, Michut v'yad tzroch nal v'lo tomar ani ha'esharti et Avram. I will not take even a thread or a shoelace from you, lest you say, I have made Avram rich. That's Genesis chapter 14, verse 23. I mean, this is an unbelievable level of consciousness about where wealth comes from. And this is a very customary thing for, let's say, defeated nations or vindicated nations to do when there is a power that has come in and has won the war, is to give tribute, is to give some sort of token of, not a small token, but a token of appreciation like this. Abraham wanted nothing to do with it. Because you don't make me rich. Hashem makes me rich. And rich, by the way, is a fungible term. Whatever we have comes from God, whether it's a small amount or a large amount. Rashi explains on this verse, this is verse 19, Melchizedek, before the exchange between the king of Sodom and Abraham, Melchizedek, who we know to be Shem ben Noach, the son of Noach, gave him a blessing. He said, Baruch Avram lekel elyon konei shemayim va'aretz. Blessed be Avram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. Now Rashi explains that the word koneh, it's an interesting thing. Koneh shemayim va'aretz means the acquirer of heaven and earth, as a description of Hashem. Rashi explains that the word koneh does mean an owner. Liknot in the Hebrew language means to buy or to acquire. But it also implies maker of heaven and earth. Because by creating the world, God acquires it for himself. And Abraham grasps all that rechush, all that wealth. He understands that this is on loan from the true owner of wealth. So he gives 1/10 of that to Melchizedek to acknowledge that truth. We might call this a concept shift from the idea of wealth as possession to wealth as participation. Abraham's new equation is radical. Ownership equals burden, but stewardship equals freedom. When a person has been blessed with material wealth, what's being communicated to that person by God is, you have responsibility for this. Now, we spoke of faith, and we spoke of wealth. And now we have to go back to the original idea of Tzedaka. Again, he believed in God. God considered that as Tzedaka. Our sources teach that Tzedaka increases abundance in the world. I think I need to make a note at this point that it's not charity. Tzedaka is often translated as charity, which is a perfectly good thing. Charity is so called because the word comes from the Latin word for heart, meaning to say that when your heart moves you, you give. That is very different than the concept of tzedakah, which is an obligation, whether you like it or not. Whether your heart moves you or you're feeling really stingy that day, doesn't make a difference. You're obligated to give. And the word tzedakah is rooted in tzadi dalet kuf tzedek, which means justice. In other words, there is a wealth imbalance in the world, and the responsibility is upon people who have more to give to people who have less, and therefore balance the scales. I say that the responsibility is on the person, is on the individual. It is not on the government to take that money away from people and redistribute it. That's a different thing. But here, what's interesting is that you'd think, okay, if I take something that belongs to me and I give it to someone else, then there's less, or I have less. And also we have, if we are economists by nature, economics is very much built on the idea of scarcity, of resources, and how are we supposed to distribute these resources amongst the population and keep things going. But our concept of tzedakah on a deep level is that it increases abundance in the world. Giving loosens the constriction around abundance. To give is to say, I trust that there is enough, because what is being given by an infinite being. And remarkably, the Gemara finds this principle inside Lech Lecha itself. Just a quote from Sanhedrin, which is in the exact same section where we find all the Noahide laws elucidated. Rav Hamnuna raises an objection. Isn't a woman also commanded in the Noahide laws? After all, it is written, for I have known him. This is a quote from Genesis chapter 18, verse 19. For I have known him so that he may instruct his sons and his household after him, that they keep the way of the Lord to do righteousness and justice. The verse includes both men and women in this moral obligation. Rav Hamnuna then explains His sons are there to establish justice, perhaps to serve on the courts. His household to practice tzedaka, charity. Okay? Abraham's household was, of course, the household of Noahides, because that's all there was in the world at the time, is described to be commanded in tzedaka. And we find several early authorities who tell us that tzedakah is counted among the Noahide commandments. We have Rav Nissim Gaon and the Ramami Pano. Both list tzedakah as one of the 30 mitzvot of B'nei Noach. You may be thinking, what are you talking about? There's 7 mitzvot. The answer is that there are 7 categories of mitzvot which contain many other mitzvot. And as we find also in the Gemara very frequently, when a new prohibition is introduced, such as Sabbath observance or theoretical Torah study, the Gemara often raises an objection and says, well, if it's really part of the problem, then that should be listed in the 7 laws, and so the idea is that there are things that are not explicitly listed in the basic 7 laws that we learn about later on, that we learn about in other sections of the Gemara. One of the ideas that is discussed in those sections is that the list that we know of as the 7 mitzvot are prohibitions, basically, with the exception of the mitzvah to establish courts of justice. But all of the rest of the mitzvot in that list are essentially prohibitions against blasphemy, prohibitions against theft, etc. So the answer that is given in the Gemara, close to this section over here, is that it doesn't list the positive mitzvot, meaning to say there are many positive mitzvot associated with Noahide observance, and you have to look elsewhere for them. So we know that in the Gemara in Chulin, a different tractate, there is an idea that there are 30, and they're not all listed there. But Rabbi Nissim Gaon, the Ramami Pano, Shmuel ben Chofni, they do list these mitzvot. So while there may be differences of opinion in terms of whether or not Noahides are as obligated as Jews or in the exact same technical format as Jews, in the mitzvah, in the commandment to give tzedakah, it's at least a moral imperative, even if it's not a formal command. So either way, a person who is giving is walking in the way of Hashem, b'derech Hashem, fulfilling a verse that defines why God chose Abraham at all. For I have known him, that he may command his household after him to do righteousness and justice, tzedakah. Faith without generosity becomes an abstraction. In other words, generosity, acts of generosity are how we allow that faith to materialize. On the other hand, generosity without faith becomes anxiety. A person knows they have to give, but they don't trust that there's going to be anything left for them if they do it. That's a basic fear that people have. Maybe I won't have enough after that. Abraham united these ideas. To believe, to have faith, is to release control. And to give is to live that belief. If we frame it as 2 competing worldviews, right? Let's say we have a material mindset and a faith mindset. So success in a material mindset equals control. But in a faith mindset, it's trust. How much do you trust? Wealth in a material mindset creates freedom. Now, we also know from Pirkei Avot that the more a person has, the more anxiety they have, because now they're worried they're going to lose it. In a faith mindset, it's not wealth that creates freedom, it's faith that creates freedom. The idea of kochavi otzim yadi, asali es chayal hazeh, my strength made all this wealth, that's a material mindset. But a faith mindset leads us to the idea that all comes from the possessor of heaven and earth. I often think to myself, like, how are we going to pay all these bills? And the answer is, God has all the money. So just please ask for it. Ask for it from Him. He's got the whole thing. If we have like a creative re-seeing, think of wealth like water. If we hoard it, it stagnates. But if we release it, it irrigates. Tzedaka turns resources from weight into flow. When the Torah says that Abraham's faith was counted as tzedaka, it unites heaven and earth. Faith, emunah, and righteousness, tzedek, are not two acts. They're one experience, trusting the divine enough to live generously. B'nai Noach who give with that kind of consciousness are participating in Abraham's covenant of conscience. If you look at the Sifsei Chachamim, Israel left Egypt with great wealth. Berchush gadol. It was given by God. It wasn't earned. Although another way to look at it is that they were simply taking the things that had been taken from them. There are many different ways to look at that. But the point is that they left Egypt with great wealth to teach that the ultimate gift is the awareness of the giver. To follow Abraham is to say, I will walk into the unknown, and I will not take what is not mine. My faith and my abundance both belong to Hashem. Faith isn't blindness. It's like seeing sideways, discovering abundance where other people see scarcity, where other people see absence. Faith is freedom from fear. Tzedaka is that faith made visible in the world. So my blessing for all of us is that may we, children of the spirit of Abraham, see our wealth as entrusted to us, our giving as sacred, and our faith the greatest tzedakah of all.